Isekai anime have built themselves this less than good reputation over the past several years, closing in on a decade, and yeah, it's not hard to see why. Granted, they have slowly shifted from their typical formula and put more focus on the quality of their stories, or at least they try to make them funny, like The Eminence in Shadow, which I am enjoying very much. But there was a time, believe it or not, when anime took advantage of the isekai setting to the maximum. You had things like Log Horizon, the less cool brother of SAO. It came with a grounded video game world, exploring how the game mechanics affected the inhabitants of it. Konosuba really doubled down on the parody side of an isekai. Grimgar, the isekai that makes you wonder if it's an isekai, and of course, ReZero, the suffering simulator. We're going to suffer today, guys? Or are we? It's been so goddamn long since I've binged an anime. And not because I had to or I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop watching. I had to watch the next episode and then the next. I had questions and my questions needed answers. I am specifically talking about the season 2 of ReZero, which is absolutely fantastic, man. Holy shit, what? Where did this season come from? I'm watching it and every episode tops the previous one. I'm thinking to myself, surely this isn't going to happen again with the next episode. Surely. Let's rewind a bit though and take a look at the first season to make this properly. ReZero always gave me the impression that there is a rich looming story waiting to burst out, that any episode, any minute, that balloon would pop and I'd have my mind blown away. Because the pieces were scattered before my eyes. Who or what brings Subaru back to life? Why do people mistake Emilia for a witch? Who is Roswell? I mean, this guy has such a I know everything but I won't say a word type of aura every time he shows up. The witch's cult, Beetlejuice, Beatrice, Elsa, there are little bits of information thrown our way but not nearly enough to give anything away. It has this constant build-up that goes on and on and on, it's fantastic. But you see, for how many things happened in the first 24 episodes, nothing really answered anything. I remember when I watched the first season years ago, it left me perplexed. I had no strong emotions about it, neither negative nor positive. I thought I liked the anime, but I was really questioning if I actually did, because overall, it felt like nothing significant happened. It almost felt like a prologue, and you gotta be crazy to make a 24 episodes prologue. I shared the same feeling after rewatching it recently, but it's quite clear that Subaru had a lot of personal growth and development as far as his character goes. He constantly rejects his flaws and struggles throughout the season because of that, but it gets to a point where he finally accepts himself and starts working to improve. Subaru thinks he is the destined hero of this new world. He expects things to go his way. He is naive, yes, but he's full of pride. Baseless pride that's only in his head. That's why he breaks his promise to Emilia during the royal selection, embarrasses her in front of everyone and still tells her that he did everything for her. He doesn't realize he prioritizes his pride, which is why Emilia pushes him away. But episode by episode he starts to understand his flaws, accepts them and tries to improve himself. And this is so well written. It deserves actual praise, it really does. Now despite that, I couldn't shake the feeling that the first season was just a setup for something grander to come, for the proper stories to start. I realize I sound like a retard saying this, but to my defense, I actually googled this and holy shit, what is happening? People are saying the end of arc 3 is the end of the prologue, then it's arc 4, no, episode 1 through 18 are the prologue, the first half is the prologue, wait, the entire season? So you see, I'm not the only dumb guy in the room. We're a collection of I believe the reason the first season feels like a prologue to some extent is because it focuses mainly on Subaru's goal rather than the goal of the narrative. Subaru wants to make Emilia happy, and specifically make her the new ruler because he loves her. This is what drives Subaru's actions in the story and is therefore his character goal. And this is what was the main focus of the first season. Of course, there were a lot of smaller moving parts that weren't directly connected to Subaru, but they weren't the main focus. Now, the narrative goal is to explain why Subaru was summoned to Lugunica and his mysterious relationship with the witch Satella. What's interesting here is that almost all the important minor characters are connected to the witches. Emilia straight up looks like Satella. Rem and Drum village was attacked by the witch cult that worships Satella. Roswell, Beatrice and Puck are connected to Echidna, the witch of greed. Every citizen of Lugunica is terrified of Satella. Now, in the sequels, a lot more characters that share a connection to these witches will show up, basically building on top of these little connections from the first season. So the catalyst of the story revolves around the witches, but more specifically the witch Satella. Now, because Subaru has a very obvious connection to Satella, his goal of making Emilia the ruler might intertwine with whatever Satella's goal is, but in the first season we have none of that. There are a lot of scattered pieces that are centered around the witch cult, like magical beasts created by the witches, who were introduced to archbishops of sin, whatever they may be. Roswell and Beatrice are very sus, and they're clearly hiding some connection with the witches, but the first season barely brushes the surface of that. However, the second season is an entirely different thing. The second season picks up right where the first left, and he wastes no time in introducing another two mysterious characters related to the witch cult. What? But fear not, this season aims to explore the main mystery and also begins to answer some of the questions that the seemingly random events of the first season posed, but never addressed. This season also has a much greater and sharper focus on the characters and their interactions when compared to much of the first season. It does limit the action and dials up the conversation a lot, but it's also very concise. So concise that the entire season takes place in a single loop and a single location, a forest protected by the Witch of Greed, Echidna. Echidna is a major player this season, and she not only has deep connections with some of the key characters in the story, but also gets involved with Subaru. Obviously, she does act a little bit as an exposition girl, but she puts a layer of her charm on top of that, so it's not really noticeable. Her conversations with Subaru are the key moments of this season 2 part 1, because that's where we get part of the answers to the previous mysteries. Beatrice, remember her and all the mysteries surrounding her? Yeah, that's been taken care of. Finally, we get some huge insight into this fucking clown. I was waiting for this moment since I first laid my eyes on him, and the reveal, I gotta be honest, it's very hit or miss. We also somehow meet Satella, who appears to have a very odd relationship with Subaru. The magical beasts also get a proper explanation, so there are a lot of answers to previous mysteries, and they do actually make sense if you rewatch the series with this new knowledge. They are very well done. However, for every single answer, we get another 4 questions. ReZero loves to constantly build upon its lore and story to the point where an answer will be given in 2 questions. And I think this is a bit of a problem for ReZero. ReZero seems to be set up like one of those epic fantasy stories, with many plot threads, even more characters, grand scope and grander mysteries. Think something like A Song of Ice and Fire, full of plot threads that eventually connect into an epic conclusion. Well, hopefully, if George writes his books. ReZero seems to use the same structure, but the problem is that we only follow Subaru. So every single important event will have to come through Subaru, as well as any answer. The return by death loop is a major part of the story, and therefore it makes it hard to get invested into another character because they can change from a loop to another. They won't change dramatically, well, I mean, some, but they will act depending on what Subaru wanted to achieve in a loop. Other characters don't have that much agency in the story because the loop can change anytime, and this makes the mystery aspect convoluted as fuck. It worked in the first season because it was subtle, yet there were enough breadcrumbs to form an idea. However, it wasn't the focus of the season. The mystery was just something to tackle later, and the later came in the second season. Now it's time to break down those mysterious events, and it doesn't really work that well. I had to stop and think about certain events every now and then because instead of answering a question, there would be even more information thrown on top of that question. This really messes the pacing of the story because we can only learn any new information through the lens of a single character. In Season 2 Part 2, we learn about Emilia's past. Because we've never followed her character before, we need to see it all at once. We never had and never will have another opportunity to dive into Emilia's character. And so, we get the first part of Season 2, which was amping up to a big climax, but at the point where it should start moving towards the finale, the pacing slows down immensely and switches to a completely different scene, Emilia's flashbacks. Now, on the one hand, these flashbacks are quite good. They offer a much needed development for Emilia and they set down seeds expected to grow in later seasons. But you see the problem with this? It's yet another setup. It's like we've been going from a setup to the next without actually having that payoff for one of those setups. There are many moving parts in ReZero, but they simply cannot be put in action by a single character. The more reveals, the slower the pacing will become, because new things need to be introduced to keep the story going. There's not enough time for a proper payoff because there needs to be time to set things up to keep the story going. It's too convoluted. It makes it feel like the real story never starts. And this isn't even considering if the reveals that we get are good enough to keep a viewer invested. This is a personal preference, but I did not like anything about the witches other than Echidna. She quite clearly took priority over the others, but the rest? Bland designs, bland personalities, very stereotypical. Are they even a threat? Why are they so bland? It's odd because when Echidna hypes them up when she talks to Subaru, they sound very threatening, so threatening that Subaru gets sick to his stomach. But when we finally meet them, I'm sorry, but it's the most underwhelming part of the season. Echidna had an aura around her, something that was alarming, warning us that she hides something important. And she was hiding something, just not that interesting. Not gonna lie, I think ReZero fumbled the witch's reveal big time. It didn't land at all. However, what ReZero managed absolutely fantastic this season was the stakes. In a story where the main character can just reset the events of the story by dying and returning to life, you'd think it would be difficult to have any significant stakes. Surprisingly, the way ReZero manages stakes in this season might be one of the best I've seen in any medium. So the basics of Subaru's power led him to return by death to a specific time frame in the past. It works exactly like a checkpoint in a game. But the trick is that neither we nor Subaru know when a checkpoint gets activated or what causes a time frame to become a checkpoint. Therefore, when he returns by death, he can do so in a very convenient time and place, or in one of the most inconvenient time and places. This not only adds a layer to the stakes, but also creates a lot of tension. Although, this concept sounds predictable, right? It's used very cleverly, just enough to trick you into forgetting about the downsides of it. For the 95% of times Subaru uses return by death, the time frame of his return is only inconvenient for himself. So, he's the only one suffering. And we get used to that. Yes, he suffers and suffers, but it's only him. And so we get this false sense of security that no matter how much Subaru suffers, he'll eventually make it work. What's funny is that Subaru gets the same sense of security as us. He makes a big mistake, well, he'll have to go through hell, but at least he gets the chance to make it right. Until he fucking doesn't. And both we and Subaru lose a character we spent the whole season with. Subaru tries to go back and fix it, but he was long past that checkpoint. A huge punch in the gut for Subaru, but also for us. Another clever way ReZero keeps the stakes high is by making its characters very unpredictable. In the second season, there is this character named Garfield. Yes, like the OG Garfield. Actually, no, not like the OG Garfield. I messed up. His name is Garfield without the D. While I was watching the anime, I thought Garf was some sort of a reference to Garfield, because he's also a cat, right? A tiger with the same pattern as Garfield. But my bad. He has some history with Ram and has a massive crush on her. It was established on quite a few occasions that Garfield has a weakness for Ram. He wouldn't lay a finger on her in a million years. Now, a couple of return by death later, we get to a point where Garfield wants to hurt Subaru, but Ram intervenes and gets in between them. You would be right to assume that Garfield would calm down because of Ram. He snaps her like a fucking twig, man, what the fuck? It's so good. This would normally contradict Garfield's character, right? But no. We're led to believe that Ram matters a lot to Garfield, but we only saw his behavior towards her when things were peaceful. When life is good and nothing bad happens, then yes, Ram has a lot of influence on him, but when things get serious, then she isn't that important to him. And that really caught me by surprise. This happens on a few occasions with different characters and they always catch me by surprise. And then there's the use of time limit. This was done extensively in the second season and is by far my favorite one. I won't go into details because it's a very important part of the second season, part 1, but basically Subaru has to pass and save 2 objectives that happen around the same time. And it gets to a point where even his return by death power isn't enough to help him save both. This leads to possibly Subaru's lowest moment in the entire series and a crucial point of growth. And man, this is done so well. So well. It's a bummer that Subaru cries literally every single episode in Season 1 Part 1, but not as bad as Emilia crying every single episode in Season 2 Part 2.